Have you ever wondered what it might feel like to wake up in the land of Galilee 2,000 years ago? Before the hum of electricity, before engines and neon lights, before headlines, hashtags, or even the printing press. Imagine the sun rising over the rolling hills of ancient Judea, the air still cool from the night, and the scent of bread baking in an earthen oven carried softly on the breeze. Tonight, you'll step into that world. Together, we're going to gently drift back in time, not through the grand stories of emperors or prophets, but through the quiet rhythm of everyday life. We'll follow the footsteps of a Galilean villager, feel the dust of the Roman roads beneath our feet, and even hear the soft clang of armour as we join a Roman soldier on his daily routine. You don't need to believe anything specific to come along, just bring your curiosity. This is history not as a list of dates or facts, but as lived experience. So if you've ever wanted to fall asleep under ancient stars beside the firelight of a different age, then I hope this journey brings you peace, insight, and rest. Before we begin, if you find yourself enjoying this content and it helps you drift off peacefully, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really does help support what I do here, and it means I can keep making these stories for you, only if you genuinely find it helpful. Now, let's begin. Part 1. A day in the life of an average person in Galilee. Let's imagine it's early in the 1st century. Somewhere around the year 28 CE, we're in a small fishing village nestled along the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. The Romans call this region Galilee, part of the province of Judea. The locals, they call it home. Our guide through this day will be a man named Elia, a name that means, "My God is my light." He's about 32 years old, married with 3 children. Like many in Galilee, he's not rich, but he's not destitute either. His family owns a modest home and a fishing boat, passed down from his father. The morning begins before the sun has crested the hills. The air is cool, a little damp. You might think mornings in the ancient world were slow and peaceful, but not for Elior. He's already awake, having risen with the twilight before dawn. In fact, his day began when the stars were still out. A practiced hand by now, he ties his cloak over his tunic, grabs his net, which he mended by lamplight the night before, and steps out into the awakening hush of the village. The village itself is made up of simple stone homes built low to the ground. The roofs are flat, often used for storage or drying herbs and fish. The streets are narrow, winding like goat paths and strewn with dust, straw, and the occasional chicken pecking at whatever it can find. Neighbours nod silently to one another as they head off for the day's work. There's no need for conversation yet. Everyone is still wrapped in their private morning haze. Elia makes his way down to the water. The Sea of Galilee, technically a freshwater lake, is smooth and silver in the early light. He greets 2 of his brothers who help him fish. They launch their small wooden boat together, pushing off with a practiced rhythm. The wood creaks gently, the oars dip silently. A mist hovers above the water like a breath that hasn't quite exhaled. Fishing in Galilee is a hard life. The catch is unpredictable. Roman taxes are high, especially under Herod Antipas, the local ruler appointed by Rome. For every haul of fish, a portion goes to toll collectors stationed along the shore. Still, it's a living, and the lake has fed generations. As they cast their nets into the water, the morning unfolds slowly. It's rhythmic work. Cast, wait, pull. Sometimes the net comes up heavy and wriggling, sometimes it comes up light. They don't speak much except to point or gesture, saving their energy. Eventually they make their way back to shore as the sun begins to rise fully. turning the hills to gold. By mid-morning, Elia returns home. His wife, Hannah, has already begun grinding grain using a simple quern stone, a task that takes much of the morning. The kids help where they can, but mostly they watch and ask questions. She'll bake the bread later, in a communal oven shared by several families. The home is a single room shared by all 5 of them. Privacy is a modern luxury. In Elia's time, life is communal. Their possessions are few: woven mats, clay pots, a few wooden utensils, oil lamps made from pottery. Most of what they own has been made by hand or bartered for locally. While Hannah prepares the midday meal, flatbread, olives, perhaps lentils or dried fish, Elia takes the catch to the local market. It's not a market like we know today, with stalls and price tags. It's more like a network of conversations, haggles, and familiar nods. Barter is common, fish for figs, or perhaps a bit of linen. A Roman official passes by, flanked by guards. People avoid his gaze, not out of fear, necessarily, but out of habit. Roman law is firm, justice is not always fair. As the late morning sun climbs higher, Elia finishes his business in the market. With the fish either sold or traded, he pockets a few copper coins, pruta, the smallest denomination in Judea, and carries home a cloth bundle, a bit of barley flour, a fig or 2, perhaps even a pinch of salt if the seller was generous. Back home, the midday meal is modest but satisfying. The family gathers around a low table, really just a mat on the floor, and shares what they have. Bread is torn, not cut. There's no formality, but there is deep respect for the food, for each other, and for the land that provides. Elior dips his bread in a bit of olive oil and eats in silence, listening to the soft murmur of his children's voices and the warm crackle of the fire. After eating, they rest. In Elia's world, the heat of midday is respected, not challenged. Work pauses. There's no notion of grinding through it like in our modern hustle culture. It's simply not sustainable. The home, built of thick stone with small openings, remains cool inside. Elia lies down on a mat and drifts into a light sleep while his wife and children quietly continue their tasks, mending clothes, shaping clay, preparing thread from wool. By late afternoon, Elior is up again. He heads out to repair a section of the house wall that's been crumbling, a task he's been meaning to do for weeks. He mixes mud and straw, forming a rough plaster that he presses into the gaps. The work is simple, repetitive, and strangely meditative. Occasionally a neighbour stops by to chat. News in this time travels not by paper or screen, but by foot and voice. Elia hears that a travelling teacher has come to a nearby town, one who speaks in parables and attracts crowds with stories about seeds, lamps, and lost sheep. Some call him a prophet, others call him trouble. Elior is curious, but sceptical. These teachers come and go. Still, he files it away in his mind. Maybe, when work slows down, he'll go hear him speak. As the sun begins to dip low again, bathing the land in soft amber, the village slowly comes alive in a different way. Children play in the street, laughing, throwing pebbles, chasing one another barefoot. The animals return from the fields, goats with gentle bleats, chickens finding their roosts. The smells of dinner begin to drift on the breeze, garlic, herbs, firewood, and earth. Elior joins his family outside. Hannah is preparing a stew with lentils and onions, flavoured with vinegar and a dash of cumin. They eat outside when they can, enjoying the cooler air and the fading light. Conversation is sparse but affectionate. His youngest daughter climbs into his lap, and he absently weaves her hair with practised fingers while talking with his eldest about a broken fishing net. Later, after the meal, the family gathers oil lamps and lights them one by one. The glow is warm and flickering, casting soft shadows on the stone walls. There is no light pollution, just stars. And in this world, the stars are not dots on a sky-glow ceiling. They're ancient and brilliant companions. Elio knows the constellations as well as he knows the hills. He points out the evening star to his children and tells them an old tale his grandfather once told him. Before bed there's a prayer. It's not elaborate. Just a quiet moment of thanks to God, to the land, to one another. Life is hard, but there is peace in its simplicity. They sleep together on mats. Elior pulls his younger son closer, covering him with a woven blanket. The air is cool again. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, an owl calls. This is a life without alerts, without deadlines, without the constant current of urgency that defines our modern age. There are worries. Yes, drought, disease, taxes, Rome. But there is also stillness, a rhythm, a familiarity with the sky, the soil, the passing of time. And perhaps, in that quiet, there is a kind of richness we've forgotten. Part 2, a day in the life of a person living in Rome. Now let's shift our perspective. From the quiet hills of Galilee to the bustling, fragrant, chaotic heart of the empire, Rome itself. Imagine, if you will, the early morning in the Eternal City. The year is roughly the same, somewhere around 28 to 30 CE. While Elior in Galilee wakes to silence and starlight, the Roman city dweller wakes to something very different. Noise. Our new guide is Livia, a woman in her mid-30s who lives with her husband and 2 sons in a multi-story apartment block, an insula, in the Subura district. It's a neighbourhood full of life, tradesmen, merchants, bakers, prostitutes, freed slaves and immigrants from every corner of the empire. The city smells of smoke and spice, sewage and bread. Water is brought in by aqueducts, those brilliant marvels of Roman engineering, and distributed through public fountains. The streets, paved with stones and carved with deep wheel ruts, are already alive with the sound of sandals, hooves and shouting vendors. Livia is up before the sun fully rises. Her husband, Marcus, works in the baths. He's a balneator, a kind of attendant and general caretaker. He's already gone for the day. She prepares a small breakfast of pulse, a thick porridge made from grains, and a bit of honey if they've had a good week. The apartment is cramped and noisy. Their flat is on the 3rd floor, which means fewer rats but more danger if the building catches fire, which, in Rome, happens more often than you'd think. The walls are thin, the neighbours close. Privacy is rare, but community is strong. After breakfast, Livia and her sons head out. One boy goes to a small local school run by a literator, a teacher who teaches letters and numbers. The other, still young, stays with her. She has work to do. Livia doesn't have a trade in the formal sense, but she makes a little coin by spinning wool and sewing hems. She might also run errands for wealthier Roman women, carrying messages, fetching ingredients, or even helping with morning rituals if she's lucky enough to get a client. As she walks the streets, you begin to see what ancient Rome really was. It wasn't all marble columns and togas. It was loud, alive, slightly grimy. The streets were full of vendors calling out in Latin and Greek, offering olives, eels, sausages, cheese, figs, wine, and cheap perfume. Graffiti covers the walls, some political, some poetic, some crude. Messages of love, satirical jabs at politicians, vulgar doodles. It's like a 2,000-year-old Twitter feed scrawled in ochre and charcoal. Livia carefully navigates the uneven stone streets of the Subura district. Rome is a city of stark contrasts. On one corner, You might see an old soldier begging for alms, his faded tunic bunched at the shoulders. Just down the block, a wealthy patrician glides past in a litter, carried by 4 strong slaves, its embroidered curtains fluttering with each step. The air smells of fish, garlic, animal dung and baking bread, all mingling in a way that's oddly familiar and yet distinctly ancient. She stops at a public fountain, a tall stone basin fed by a spur from one of the great aqueducts. Water flows freely here, clean and cold. Livia fills a ceramic jug, balancing it expertly on her hip. The fountain is a social hub. Women exchange gossip, mutter complaints about the rising cost of grain, and eye the sky for signs of the weather to come. There's talk this morning about the annona, the state grain dole, and whether the distribution will be late again. For many plebeians, this grain is essential. Rome promises its citizens free or subsidized food as part of keeping the peace. Bread and circuses, they say. As long as you give the people both, they won't rise up. Livia continues on, stopping by the shop of a friend who needs help stitching a torn tunic. In exchange, she'll be paid with a small cup of olive oil and a little garum, a fermented fish sauce used in everything from meats to stews. It smells strong, but adds deep, salty flavour to nearly every dish. By midday, the city has grown louder. The heat rises between the stone buildings, and the streets seem to shimmer with it. Unlike in Galilee, there's no rest from the midday sun here, not unless you can afford it. Wealthy Romans retreat to shaded courtyards or cool rooms in their domus houses, sometimes enjoying meals in the triclinium, reclining on couches as slaves serve them multiple courses. But Livia eats quickly, seated on a stool in the shadow of a tall wall. Her meal is simple: some bread soaked in vinegar and oil, a few olives, and the tiniest sliver of cheese. She eats with her fingers, chatting with the vendor next to her about the recent rumours from the Senate. Someone was exiled again. Someone else accused of treason. It's all very distant, but also somehow part of daily life. Politics in Rome bleeds into the streets. In the afternoon, Livia walks her younger son to the Thermae, the public baths, where her husband Marcus works. These bathhouses are more than places to get clean. They're the social centres of the city. Here, the classes mix more than anywhere else. Rich and poor, slave and senator, all come to bathe, exercise, gossip and relax. It costs a small fee, usually just a coin, and includes access to hot rooms, cold pools and massage services. While Marcus tends the furnaces below the caldarium, Livia sits nearby with a few other women. The women's section is smaller and more secluded but still lively. She enjoys the warmth, lets her feet soak in the cool basin, and listens as 2 older women argue about a street performer they saw in the Forum, a man who juggled knives while quoting Virgil. Later she helps her son dress again, rubbing a little oil into his skin to keep it from drying in the sun. They head home before the streets grow too chaotic. The evenings in Rome can turn rough. Street gangs, yes, real ones, sometimes roam the alleys. Political factions with loyal followers will clash near temples. It's best to be indoors by sunset. Back at the apartment, Marcus returns late, tired and smoky from tending the bathhouse furnaces. They eat dinner by lamplight, more of the same bread, a little stew made from lentils and bits of cabbage, and the occasional treat, a date or 2, brought from a cousin who works near the harbour. The lamps are simple clay bowls filled with oil, a wick soaking inside. The light is dim but warm. Livia sits with her family on their narrow sleeping mats, the noise of neighbours muffled through the walls. Somewhere below them a baby cries. Above, someone's had too much wine and is arguing about Caesar. Before sleep, Livia says a quick prayer to Vesta, goddess of the hearth. She's not especially devout, but the ritual is comforting. She kisses each son on the forehead and pulls the threadbare blanket over them. Her life is busy, unpredictable, and full of pressures, but it is a life full of moments, noisy, vivid, and deeply human. Part 3. A day in the life of a Roman soldier. Now let's step further afield, away from the city, away from the hills of Judea, to the frontier. Somewhere along the dusty border of the Roman Empire, a soldier rises. Our guide now is Lucius Varro, a Roman legionary stationed in a remote castrum or military fort near the Danube River. It's early spring, the ground is cold, the fort smells of smoke, leather, and iron. Lucius is 35, an old man by soldiering standards. He's been in the legions for nearly 15 years. His term is almost up. If he survives another 2 or 3 campaigns, he'll be granted land and Roman citizenship. 2 things he never thought he'd have when he joined as a scrawny 17-year-old from rural Italia. He wakes to the call of the buccina, a long curved horn that echoes off the wooden walls of the fort. His breath forms small clouds in the cold air. Sleeping quarters are shared. Stone walls, bunk beds, wool blankets. Privacy is non-existent, but bonds are strong. These men live together, eat together, bleed together. Lucius pulls on his tunic, belts his gladius, the short Roman sword at his side, and tightens the leather straps of his lorica segmentata, his segmented armour. Outside, drills have already begun. The drill yard is already a hive of motion. Lucius joins his fellow legionaries in formation. The centurion, a hardened veteran with a voice like gravel being ground under a chariot wheel, barks commands. Ad signa, to the standards, exerce, train. Training in the Roman legions is relentless. Even in peacetime, soldiers practice daily. Marching drills, swordplay, shield maneuvers. It's not just about discipline, it's about muscle memory. Roman tactics depend on precision and unity. One soldier out of place can disrupt an entire formation. Lucius trains with the gladius, his short sword, slicing downward at a thick wooden post called a palus. Each strike is controlled but powerful. They aim not to hack wildly, but to thrust, clean and fast just below the ribs. The shield, the scutum, is nearly as large as he is, and just as important. It's protection, weapon, and wall, all in one. After 2 hours of training, the men are dismissed for a short meal. It's a rationed affair. Dried wheat biscuits, a bit of salted pork, and wine diluted with water. Lucius chews slowly, seated on a bench beneath the open sky, listening to the murmurs of his unit. Some talk about home, others complain about the cold, or the officers, or the rumours of barbarian raids in the north. He doesn't say much. He's been through too many winters to waste breath on complaints. The afternoon brings construction duty. Roman forts are never truly finished. They're always being reinforced, repaired, or expanded. Lucius joins a crew digging a new latrine trench beyond the palisade wall. It's back-breaking work, but necessary. Sanitation is a serious matter. Disease can wipe out a cohort faster than any enemy. There's a moment where he pauses, wiping his brow. His eyes drift to the hills beyond the camp. Somewhere out there, beyond the forest line, live the tribes Rome has not yet conquered. To them, Lucius is part of an occupying force. To Lucius, they are the edge of the known world. He wonders, just for a second, what a quiet life might look like. A farm, a wife, olive trees. But then the horn sounds again, and the thought dissolves. Later, there's weapons maintenance. Every soldier is responsible for his gear. Lucius sits in the armory courtyard, sharpening the edge of his gladius, checking the fit of his sandals, caligae, and oiling the leather straps of his armour. A poorly maintained sword can get you killed, and besides, there's something oddly calming about the routine. The scrape of stone on steel, the scent of oiled leather. In the evening, Lucius and his contubernium, an 8-man unit, share a warm stew cooked in a large pot over a communal fire. Lentils, leeks, a bit of meat if they're lucky. They pass around a flask of wine and take turns telling stories, some true, some wildly embellished. One young recruit tries to boast about a girl he met in a village last week. The others groan and mock him gently. Lucius smiles, shaking his head. He's heard every variation of this story, twice. Before lights out, there is a final formation. The centurion inspects the men, checks reports, and delivers the latest updates from command. Sometimes it's routine. Sometimes it's the beginning of something bigger. Tonight, it's quiet. Lucius heads to his bunk. He sets aside his gear with care, lays down on a straw-filled mattress, and pulls a rough woolen blanket over his shoulders. The stars above are sharper out here on the frontier. There's no city smoke, no shouting vendors. Just the crackle of a fire, the creak of wood, and the sound of boots pacing the rampart above. He drifts off, thinking about home, about whether he'll ever see it again. And now we gently return from the ancient world, through time and memory, through stone streets and distant stars, back to our present moment. What do we take with us from this journey? Perhaps it's a sense of rhythm, a reminder that life in every age has had its routines. The rising sun, the midday pause, the warmth of food shared with family, whether in the hills of Galilee, the tenements of Rome, or the outpost of the empire, people rose each day to meet challenges that feel both ancient and strangely familiar. They worried about food, about money, about the future. They laughed at their children's jokes. They loved. They argued. They told stories by firelight. They longed for peace. And while our modern lives are filled with notifications, noise, and the urgency of the now, their lives were filled with the immediacy of survival and the quiet beauty of simplicity. So tonight, as you fall asleep, carry with you the stillness of a Galilean night, the hum of Roman streets at dawn, or the wind sweeping across a lonely frontier. These are not relics. These are echoes, echoes of people like us. Thank you for listening and for taking this journey into the past with me. If this story helped you relax, if it transported you even a little, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so I can keep making more journeys like this for you. Until next time, sleep well, traveller.